welcome once again to Witchcraft and Voodoo. I'm your host this time, Sable Aradia, Wiccan Priestess, and I'm here with my co-host, Lilith Dorsey, Voodoo Priestess.
Hi, hello everybody.
And today we thought we would talk about writing and publishing as our topic. Since both of us are pagan authors, we thought that this might be an interesting topic to discuss. People are probably wondering, what's publishing in the pagan market like? You know, do people just publish in the pagan market? Is it better to go traditional or independent? Maybe we can offer some insight on that. So, Lilith, let's start. Hey, let's start with what was your first book?
My first book, my first officially published book, was Voodoo and Afro-Caribbean Paganism. But I started out doing a newsletter, which I really feel like at this point was like the blog of the time, you know, when we started. I think we started in 91 is when we started the newsletter, you know. So at that point, it was just a way to get myself out there, and that eventually grew into my friendships with other authors who became, one of them became a publisher, and they said, I want this book. Otherwise, I never would have sat down and written, you know, hundreds and hundreds of pages. That seemed like way too much time and attention for me. But yeah, that was my first book officially, and that came out in 2004. So I was sitting here thinking about this topic, and I was like, wow, damn, I've been a published author for a really long time.
Yeah.
There's so
like
many.
Way longer than me. Good for you.
Yeah, well, whatever. There's so many people like sort of bursting into the pagan, you know, witchcraft publishing market lately. So I think that this is a really good topic that I think that, you know, hopefully the two of us have some insight after years and years and years of doing it, that we might be able to help out somebody who's just starting, you know, with what's the best way of doing these things.
Absolutely. You know, I never thought about that, but I sort of got my start in newsletters too. I was an administrator on a one of those Yahoo Groups newsletters that went around called What's Brewin'. And it was all, you know, there were little recipes and some spells and some articles on goddesses and different traditions and different practices. And yeah, I learned a lot from that process, and it was a lot of fun. And this was, of course, you know, the age of Yahoo Groups and MySpace and all that sort of thing. So lots of brightly colored, flashy, tacky GIFs that are considered to be very, you know, definitely 90s now, but we loved it and it was fun, right? There was no money in it, but it was fun.
Yeah, I feel you on that. Yes, definitely. So when did your first book come out?
My first book came out in 2014, and that was The Witch's 8 Paths of Power. Yeah, so that was through Wiser Books. Well, Red Wheel Wiser, they are now. And that was kind of fun because I have a long story about how I never would have finished that were it not for National Novel Writing Month, which seems odd when we're talking about writing nonfiction witchcraft books, but it was something I was kind of, you know, poking at with a stick and dabbling in, right? And then I'm like, okay, you know what? I need to actually sit down and get some discipline and finish something. So I used NaNoWriMo's platform to teach myself how to do that. And then I started writing the book every day, and it was done. And I think I finished it in 2012, right? So, you know, and then I sought out a publisher, and actually that was stroke of lightning sort of thing they tell you never happens. I wanted Wiser, and I got Wiser. So it was a lucky break for me. So, yeah.
That's so funny. You're talking. My most recent book, Love Magic, that was published with Wiser, and I was at Donald Weiser's memorial service a year ago, and I was sitting there talking to other authors like Judica Isles and Theodic and things like that, you know, and we're all sitting there going, yeah, we always wanted to be a Weiser author. I remember going into the store, and they had a rare and occult book section, and I was like this 12, 13-year-old girl, and they're like, you can't touch those, get out of there, and they scared me, and I ran away, and I was like, oh, someday I'll come back and I'll touch those, you know. So it really was sort of where I wanted to be, because, you know, even growing up as a young witch and everything like that, that this is, you know, one of the biggest people that was out. So
yeah, you learned that this little onk right here, well, you can't
yeah,
see it in the bright light, but it meant the book was going to be awesome, right? You knew what that
yeah,
was about.
definitely.
So, yeah,
That's what the bumper
I was
sticker
there.
says, right?
Right, and Llewellyn's Crescent too. I was into. Oh, you know, I got. There was a thing going around in the 90s for a while where everyone's like, oh, you know, they're not real, you know, they're all like, you know, light witchcraft. No, they're not all light witchcraft, actually. It's just that the ones you hear about tend to be lighter witchcraft because they sell, you know? So there's that balance of, you know, are you doing something new and are you doing what the market wants, right? So, you know, they publish good work too, right?
Definitely,
They
definitely.
do
There's
good
some
stuff.
amazing, you know, work that they've been publishing, especially recently. You know, a lot of my friends
Oh,
that are
yeah.
authors have been publishing with them. And another author pointed out to me a couple of weeks ago, you know, he said to me, he was like, you know, they're an international publisher, which I think really does give them props. It's sort of a very different kind of market. And this isn't, as an author or writer, this wasn't everything I ever thought about. I was just like, no, they make the books and yay, and the books will sell and yay, you know. I was so naive about actually what went on, which is weird because both my parents were in publishing when I was growing up. Both of them were, that's how they met. They were both were, and my father was working for, you know, HarperCollins until he died, you know. So it's funny to me that I had such an, because they were in production. They didn't have anything to do with like who wrote what or anything like that. So I didn't really realize what the process was on this side of things. You know, that makes me sound all fancy. I'm not fancy, anybody, but
No, that's cool. You know, it's cool you've got this background. That's really neat. Because there's an aspect that the writer doesn't think about a lot is, okay, the fact is creating a book is not all about you, right? You are the start of it, and then it is a real collective effort. And everybody has something that they bring to it that you couldn't do, right? Your editor brings something to it, and your copy editor brings something to it, and the person who does the formatting and designing brings something to it. And you know that you find this out if you're doing independent publishing, because then you have to do all the shit yourself.
yeah.
I'm telling you,
Oh yeah.
It's a lot of work. Right, it's a lot of work. Do you do any indie publishing at all, or are you strictly traditionally published?
I used to do, like, you know, I would go to the copy store and actually make them myself. Right now, all we have are ebooks. So I self-publish ebooks, you know, just
Right.
because that's so much easier, I think, for a lot of people. But I do still get people calling me up and like, I want a paper copy. I want to hold it in my hand, you know. And I appreciate that. You know, it was interesting. I met somebody, I just came back from Temple of Witchcraft's Temple Fest in New Hampshire a couple of weeks ago. And a couple of the attendees were from the Library of Congress. And I was there with Thorne Mooney and some other authors, and we were talking about preserving books. And this attendee had told me that she worked for the Library of Congress, and they were actually now seeking actual physical books because they're not really sure what digital media to rely on. And they've found that it's better for them to actually preserve the actual book there at the Library of Congress, which I thought was fascinating, you know, even with all this digital media and digitizing everything, that they really still do want to save books that way. And I think it's beautiful, honestly. I like books that way, you know, bury me with 100 books, you know.
Yeah, no doubt. I prefer paper books too, to be honest with you. There's my experience is that there are two different markets that are their entirely own separate group. What's happening is that all the people who, like me, right, used to read, you know, the yellow Daw paperbacks, right, with the yellow spines, right, and the dime westerns and all that stuff and the silhouette romances, right, now they're reading ebooks. And the reason why they're doing that is money. It's all about the price, right? Because we're getting this divide where the prices for ebooks are being kept low, perhaps more artificially low than they should be, considering the share that the author actually gets, even through Amazon, right? And the print market, which is, you know, I mean, you got to go trade paperback at least if you're going anything. And for those who are unfamiliar with the terms, right, the little ones, you know, the Stephen King books you get on the shelf, they're not so little, they're about this thick now and they're tall, right? But those are called pocket books. Right, and then you have the trade paperback, which is the tall paperbacks with the often very fancy art, right? and then hardcovers, right? And the only things that are getting hardcover treatments these days are things that they expect are going to hit New York Times bestseller, right? So it's a different market developing. People have different needs. I find that we'll get into the comparisons later as far as that goes. But what I wanted to talk about, where I was going with this, I was going to the price point divides things, but the paper book is still highly prized, right? Most people prefer paper books. They thought millennials were going to give up on paper books and we were all going to be totally digitized from then on. And they were wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Millennials statistically prefer paper books too, and so does iGen, or whatever they're calling the generation that is coming after them. So, but they're more expensive these days, right? People who are, not making as much money as others can't afford to buy a lot of them. I'm in this income bracket. So for me, what happens is I have an e-reader, right? And I go to the library. And if I really like the book, I will invest in a paper copy and keep it, right? So that's kind of where I'm at. And I think most people are in that space, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always gone to the library. That was one of the things I did when I was little, and I still do it today. And I think it allows me, a way to have access to stuff that I would not have otherwise. Yes, I can go to a major bookstore chain and look at the book and even sit there for a couple of hours if I really want to, but I don't know, whatever. I'm an introvert. I don't want to sit in public and read or something like that, So if I go to the library, I can take it home. I'm a small person. I've literally carried 20, 30 books out of the library because New York, we're allowed to take 100 at once, which is dangerous for somebody.
Oh, the overdue fines I used to stack up.
Oh,
they were prestigious, I'll tell you.
Yeah, me too. I probably could have bought most of the books that I was checking out, but I still like the fact of supporting the library and being there, and it's something I really try and instill in all the young people that are around me, that look what you can get. It's like a store where you don't have to pay for anything, but you can bring it back, but that's okay. Maybe you didn't really want it anyway. And I think that it's just a better way of thinking about it, and it was really special to me to know that, like my first book that I mentioned, my daughter, speaking of millennials, she's 28 now. My daughter said to me when she was in college, one of her professors came up to her and was like, "Oh, is Lilith Dorsey your mother? Did she write this anthro book about voodoo?" And Aria was like, "Yeah, she did." And I was like, "Wow, that's great." You know what I mean? To actually have something that people could use as a teaching tool, and, that they could literally try and teach my daughter with it. I just thought that was fantastic. It was a great moment. Definitely.
That's a good point, right? One of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard is write the book you want to read, right? If it doesn't exist, make it, right? And obviously you set out to do that, right? I set out to do the same thing, right? I've seen about 1 million, okay, this is the basic how-tos of Wicca, right? I've seen tons of them, but nobody ever talked about things like Great Rite. Nobody wanted to discuss the use of psychotropic substances in magic, which I had, actively seen going on around me for years, right? Nobody wanted to talk about the use of the scourge and circle, right? So I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to write this book, and I'm going to put this out there, right? And I got criticism for it too. I got some negative reviews because, oh, she mentioned drugs and she's bad, oh, sex, oh, whatever, right? Because somebody had to write it, so I wrote it, And now there's lots of that kind of thing. It's not alone anymore. People are writing it. A lot of it is independently published. A lot of it is published through small press publications like Moon Press. They're doing some great work, right? And it's out there, and you can get it now. You don't have to, try to track down the hidden Alexandrian group in your, of which there are like 5 people in a huge area, right? And beg them to teach you anymore to learn some more advanced stuff. You do if you want to initiate in their tradition, right? But if you just want to, practice the magic, the books are out there. And I love it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, you gave someone a shout out. I feel like, oh, I should give a shout out. My friend Louis Martinet, who's he traditionally published the New Orleans Voodoo deck with Inner Traditions, which is a lovely publisher out of Vermont. But he runs his own publishing company, and he always has, called Black Moon Publishing. He started out writing for the Cincinnati Journal of Magic, and in recent years, they've always published chapbooks. Lou used to call himself the avant-garde of the 19th century, which I just thought was beautiful. I'm like, Louis, do you know what year it is? But and they still publish chapbooks. They did two that I'm in, an amazing one about Dr. John Montagny, the original Dr. John, the drummer for Marie Laveau. And his wife did one called Women of Babylon, which are all different sex writings. I thought of it when you were talking about that. They're all different, sexual writings by women priestesses that engage in sex magic, it's a beautiful, beautiful book. I really love it. I really, really love it.
I've been meaning to track down a copy, actually. I've seen, it comes up on my Amazon feed every now and then. I'm like, yes, I should get this book. And I go to track it down and, yeah. But
no, I know. It's hard.
I will.
I'm in it. It was hard to get a copy of it. So, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, but you guys are actually one of the first out there who were doing things like that. I remember specifically, I think you guys came up actually when I was doing research for the Witches 8 Paths of Power. So,
yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, but again, they started out, I mentioned Louis's wife, Michelin, partner, however she wants to be called. But, they started out, they had the largest occult archives, and you would write them. They had these lists and lists. They would keep everything, all these writings and stuff that were in public domain because they were, old. And you would send them money, and they were charging, at the beginning, they were charging people like 10 cents a page. And I was like, that's what it would cost if you went to the copy store. Charge people 20 cents. I'm not trying to rip people off, but I was like, they did some amazing work. Unfortunately, a lot of it was lost during Katrina, so that was a shame, and they don't really do that much of it anymore, but they are still publishing quite a lot of amazing stuff. And since we're on YouTube, they have a YouTube channel too, which is amazing. They've been doing some interviews with some of the authors. Nima, who just passed, there's an amazing series of interviews with her.
Cool. Please send me the link, and I will make sure to put it in the video description so that people can get it. And probably I'll even do one of those little cards at the top of the video. That's cool. And it's good that they're out there and they're doing that. I also know some people who do some archiving. There are two major couples in Canada that have been active figures in the Canadian pagan community for a long time. The Jameses, they were the founders of the Wiccan Church of Canada, right? They have an immense occult library that they keep, and I don't know if I've sent them a copy yet, but I should. They've got a focus on Wiccan literature in particular and Canadian paganism, right? But they'll do whatever, right? They'll keep track of all of it, right? And then there's Bythor and Celine, who are in Edmonton, Alberta, and they have a huge library of it's everything too, but their primary interest was ritual magic and Thelema, so they've got a lot of that kind of information there, and a lot of their stuff crosses over, but they're archiving, right? They're keeping that stuff, and I'm glad somebody is, right? I've got this stack of occult magazines that came to me when I was running my metaphysical store, and I've been thinking I should send them to them just so that it's in one of these archives and it's there, and you can go to their house and go through the stuff and do your research. They'll put you up on their couch. They don't mind.
That's great.
Yeah. I don't think they send out the books anymore. They might do scans. I'm not sure. You'd have to talk to them about that. But yeah.
No, that's fascinating. And I think that's really one of the reasons I became an author, because I wanted to get this information out there, before I was coming up with it, I was like, oh, I'll write this, and then I won't have to answer all those questions that I've answered in the book. Yes. That was ridiculous. I still have to answer the same questions over and over again that's in the book. Right? Right?
No, I had the same thought. I'm like, well, I'll just be like, well, here,
Yeah.
No, it never works that way, does it? Oh,
Oh
yeah.
gosh, I remember one idiot. I went to her workshop and she's going, well, I'm not, as she gets a question in the workshop, she goes, I'm not going to answer that. It's going to be in the book next year. And I was like, lady, what are you talking about?
No, you have to answer the question, because how do people know if they want to read the damn book or not?
Oh, yeah,
Oh.
yeah. Ah, yeah, yes. Very entertaining. But
Shooting
yeah.
down your own sales. Good for you. Okay.
No, I know. I mean, I was trying to think, but I had an interesting conversation with Jason Miller a little while ago, last month at Hex Fest, and we're talking to somebody else about writing, and I think you were saying before, one of my best advice things about writing was to write every day. I write every day. I'm one of those, whatever, early morning kind of people. I get up, I find out, my mind is sort of fresh in that moment, and Jason had some wonderful advice. He said, always end in the middle of a thought or in the middle of a sentence if you can, which I think is another really good trick to do, because that'll sort of, jumpstart your mind. Me, I tell myself, look, you're going to write for as much as I can stand. Maybe it's 10 minutes, maybe it's a half hour, maybe it's whatever, but I just know that that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to focus on that. And that's really helpful to me, and
So
you can write a lot that way. That's what I've found.
There's our first piece of advice to aspiring pagan authors: write every day if you can, right? Write in the cracks when you can't write every day. I'm going to be teaching a class on that, by the way.
Oh, nice.
Sometime this fall through the Kat Rambo Academy for Wayward Writers, which is at her website, kittywampus.net.
Nice.
Right? It's called Writing in the Cracks, How to Find Time for Writing When You Have None. Because I'm like a pro. I've figured out some amazing solutions.
That's great. I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah. I mean, I think it helps me too sometimes, even if I write something else too. You know what I mean?
Yes.
If I'm so tired of writing this one project that I have a deadline or I've been working for, I'll write a blog post or I'll write a poem or something else like that, just to still have the process in there. It's like just training my brain that way.
Yeah, it's like a muscle. You have to work it out regularly, because if you don't, it becomes more difficult and more tiring when you get back to it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
give up your delusions about, I'm an artiste and I'm going to write when I'm inspired. Okay, sure. Go ahead, and you'll publish one book in your lifetime, right? And if you get there, right, which you'll probably not, because you'll go back over the book and you'll rethink it. And you'll think, oh, I can tweak this, I can fix that. Maybe if I do this before I send it here. And that's the other piece of advice I would give people is it's never going to be perfect. There is no such thing. You will read it afterwards and go, oh, why the shit did I say that?
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So don't do that to yourself. Decide it's good enough.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. Some of the stuff that's out there, I'm sure it's good enough. Really. Could be predictive text from a robot. Like, sure, push that, send it in, man. Get it going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah. I had another author remind me of that, which I realized as very early as well. You know what I mean? Your contract is for X amount of words with, X title and you as author. You know what I mean? What's in that? That's up to you. Honestly, that doesn't get specified in a contract. So if you want to write about, whatever, editors are going to hate me, but if you want to write about what happened in the 4th grade or something, that's valid. Sure. Put whatever in there.
Yep. Yeah, there's usually, your editor could decide to reject it, but, yeah, right? Like, okay, yes, process, right? The publishing process. Suppose you want to get published with a metaphysical publisher. What do? You go find their submission guidelines page, and you read it, and you do what they tell you to do, right? You don't go, oh, well, I'm an exception because I'm specially special and the rules don't apply to me. No, you don't do that, right? You do what they tell you to do, right? Usually they'll ask you for a cover letter, a synopsis, right? They might ask you for a marketing plan. What they want from you there is not like a business degree. They want, okay, well, I've got this massive Twitter platform and I've got this YouTube channel and I can do this, right? I've got a blog tour planned and I've talked to these writers. And hey, you want to do a blog tour with me on my blog about your new pagan book? By all means, talk to me. I'd love to host you, right? I'm totally cool.
I'm down for it too. You could be over here as well.
Yeah, exactly. I'm always looking for stuff to add content to my blog. So that's perfect. I would love to do that, you know. And that's what they're looking for, right? So you send them that, right? And usually they'll tell you how much of the book to send them. Might be the first 5 chapters. I think that's what it was for Wiser when I did my submission, right? And you wait to hear from them, basically. And usually it'll take a few months. Don't send it anywhere else while you're waiting to hear back from them, right? And, they'll tell you if they like it or if they don't, or if they have some critiques, they might tell you that. Don't take it personally, because this is a craft. And as much as it is a talent, right? We have this illusion that writing is just, you're born with it or you're not. That's nonsense. It's, often people are born with a modicum of talent and interest. You have it or you wouldn't be writing in the first place. So now what you've got to do is be better at it. And there are little tricks that you learn in the process that make it better, right? And they will give you advice on that, right? And then if they accept it, there's an editing process, right? You'll be paired with an editor. My editor was awesome. I don't remember how to pronounce her last name. She doesn't work for Wiser anymore, unfortunately. Her name was Amber.
Good. I don't know how to pronounce it either. Gutenberg, maybe?
Oh, you know her. Okay.
She was my first editor as well.
Oh, I cannot tell you how grateful I am to her. She was amazing, because I submitted in 120,000 word manuscript, right? I was told to cut it to 70,000, right? I made it to 80,000 with her help, and I said, if you ask me to cut anything else, we are going to have to change the subtitle, because the subtitle was a complete course in magic and witchcraft, right? And I'm like, I just know this, but they took it, right? They don't have to. The terms of the contract will usually stipulate that they get to reject, and you get to change your mind at any point, right? And yes. The advance at some point will change hands, usually half when the manuscript is submitted and accepted. And that's after like the first round of, okay, cut things, right? And then half when the book gets published, right? And don't expect anything more than that, right? I was told you will never get more than your advance. I did, actually. I did get more than my advance, yay! But that's... yeah, I know, yay, right? It actually, that's a huge success in Pagan publishing.
Yeah, it is.
So I'm very proud, right?
Yeah.
But don't, because I know some great writers, lots of great Pagan writers, and many of them, and I think I read their stuff and I'm like, I wish I could write like this, right? And, they never have, right? So it really is all about whether it'll pick up or not. And that depends on a lot of luck and on the work of your publicist, right? Most publishing companies will have a publicist that they will work with. Wiser's was excellent, still are. They'll still do things like post when I'm doing witchcraft classes or whatever on the Wiser blog, and they're going to get something else from me eventually. I just have been concentrating more on fiction in the past few years. So
I mean, I think I agree with you.
It can be a really cool thing. If you're not into marketing, go ahead. I've been talking for a while, so your turn.
Oh, no. I was just gonna say, I think that I had a little bit of naivete on both books about the extent of what the, marketing department was going to do. I mean, that really, I'm not saying people should go out and spend their entire advance on a personal publicist, because I've heard horror stories about authors that pay people thousands of dollars and they do nothing, but I think you should definitely be mindful about this is your job just as much, if not more, than it is their job, because you're the face of this book, and you're the one that has to get out there, and I think that, as I mentioned before with the newsletter, if I hadn't been out there with the newsletter and the workshops and doing rituals and performing and doing all of that stuff in the pagan community, I don't think I ever would have had a book, because I don't think my name, would have really meant anything when it showed up in front of the publishers. I think that was really a good way. And I see it now. I see other people that have podcasts or blogs getting book deals. And I think that those, and teachers in the community. I mean, I think those things are all equally important, if at all possible, in order to make yourself known, especially these days. You know, it was funny. I remember I went back to, you know, my grad program at NYU has this little thing for they do 10-year reunions, and they send this thing out. It's like, we're responsible for 84 books being published in the past 10 years. And I thought, wow, that's weird. I don't think either of my books are under their radar at all, you know, because they're not academic books. They're just often these weird little fluff. And I'm like, wow, look at that. And I was sitting there talking to a friend of mine, Christina, and she's like, yeah, and I got an Emmy. My Emmy's not in there either, you know. So I think that we all have accomplishments, and we all have to sort of make sure that's known everywhere that we go in every way possible. You know, I mean, it may be shameless, but self-promotion is necessary, you know, and I'm not great at it. I always feel guilty, or like, oh, I posted this a week ago, they've seen it already, you know, but that's just not how it is. You really have to, you know, and make your own, like you mentioned, you know, I was just looking at another one of our bloggers, you know, make your own book tour, make sure that's going on, make sure you get yourself everywhere that you can, make sure you have, you know, business cards and postcards, and I made stickers, and I had contests and all those things that people are really going to want to see you do, you know, and especially these days, putting yourself everywhere, you know, fill out your Amazon author page, go to Goodreads, all of those things, because those are going to be different avenues for you to really market yourself to an audience that might not be in front of you when you're giving a workshop or watching the show for us right now or whatever. You know, you need to hit as many people as possible.
Yeah, it's a fact, and it doesn't come naturally to me at all. I mean, first of all, most writers, I think most writers are introverts.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Otherwise, we wouldn't enjoy spending hours by ourselves listening to our own brains, right? So it's hard, right? It's hard to do that. And then, you know, I've got cultural impetus. I'm from Canada, right? In Canada, you do not brag about your shit, right? But the truth is, if I don't tell people about my book, nobody's going to know. You have to do it. If you don't believe in what you're doing, neither will anybody else. So you have to speak with it confidently. And yes, you have to be a little shameless. You have to, you know, hey, have you got any projects coming up over the next couple of weeks? Well, yes, as a matter of fact, my story is going to be out in this magazine. Yes, you have to do that stuff, right? Because if you don't, people will miss it. And yes, that whole thing of, oh, I posted this a week ago, people have seen it already. Okay, you know what? I feel that way too, right? But I also, I have a personal story to tell about this one. Now, when I was running my metaphysical store, right, the very last week that I closed my doors, right, I was liquidating my stock and I was leaving, right? People were walking in saying, I didn't know you were here.
Oh my gosh.
Right? I had been there for 7 years, right? But it's so hard to get people's attention.
Yeah.
There's so much information out there. Just because you posted it on your Twitter a week ago doesn't mean somebody was on at 9 o'clock in the morning and saw it. Try it again at 3 in the afternoon a week later, right? Because maybe people will see it then. Right? But while we're on that subject, do not make your social media a commercial stream. I see this so much with indie authors in particular. Yeah. They're like, buy my book, buy my book, buy my friend's book, buy my other friend's book, buy this book from this person I met in the subway, right? No, people don't want that, right? If people are going to follow you on your social media, they want interesting stuff, right? Okay, so I'm a pagan writer and I'm a science fiction and fantasy writer. So what do, right? I post stuff about, you know, what I think about the books that I read, right? Because maybe other people will be interested in that. And I read a lot, so I post a lot of book reviews, right? I post science facts, space facts. I'm really interested in that kind of stuff partially for spiritual reasons, because the natural world is beautiful and sacred to me, and I'm just fascinated by the cosmos and the way it works. Right? But also from a scientific perspective, you know, well, oh, isn't it neat all the stuff we're discovering, right? So I share that, right? I share stuff about the writing process because maybe people are interested in becoming writers. And one of my favorite things to do is when someone comes and says, okay, I've got this book idea and I've kind of started it and I don't know how to get it out there. I want to help you, right? Because I've been there. And You know, for me, it's like when your period's late, you know, it's like, let's get on with it, you know, right? I remember that feeling of urgency and pressure and, you know, an unhappiness, right? I want to help people who want to find that happiness. So, you know, and that's, so yeah, this is kind of stuff I post on my social media, right? Jokes. I have a warped sense of humor. You follow my Twitter long enough, you'll figure it out. And all that's part of my brand, right? Because if you get me on your panel, right, if you ask me to come to your event, right, and I come to speak on whatever subject, okay, well, what am I going to be like? I'm going to be like this, okay? This is what you're going to get. I'm going to be irreverent, right? I'm probably going to talk too much, right? I'm just as interested in what other people are saying, right? But I'm gonna like gravitate onto the, you know, like OCD on the stuff that I'm really fascinated with. I'll probably make some smart ass jokes, you know, I'll make a few cynical, sarcastic comments, and that's me, right? So that's part of the job too, right? You can get paid speaking fees. I have not gotten a lot of these in my life yet, but you know, I have gotten some, right? So
I got a couple.
yeah, that's about it. Yeah. More often I get, please come to our conference, we'll cover your travel expenses. I've gotten that more often, and I'm in, man. You know, absolutely. I would love to come because I love conferences and I love having these kind of conversations with other people who are interested in the stuff that I'm interested in. So yeah, right. That's, now I get to go to the conference. It's more than enough payment for me, man. You know, so yeah, but that's part of your, you can get speaking fees this way. Most writers make, you know, the ones who are actually making a real living at it, that is part of where they make most of their living. They don't make it from the royalties on the book. Not even Stephen King makes most of his money from the royalties on the book. He probably makes more from the movie rights.
Yeah,
You know?
I mean, there are some people with six-figure advances. I don't think there's any pagans necessarily with six-figure advances.
No.
I do know, I mean, in my whatever, 25 plus years of being in the pagan community, I can say I know 3 writers that don't have another day job. Like that, but most of their income doesn't come from writing. It'll come from reading a lot. Like they'll go do an event and they'll do readings for people there. You know, I've had a couple tell me that half their income was from something like that. So, you know, for those of you who are our writers and also psychic readers, you know, don't overlook that because that's definitely a really great source of income for a lot of us, I think, you know, and like you said, also performing or doing other things like that. There are a couple that I know that make a lot of money with residuals, but, you know, I mean, what am I talking a lot of money? I'm talking like $50,000, $60,000 a year. I'm not talking like they're making, again, 6 figures. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Paganism is a niche market. There's not a lot of pagans in the world. We're pretty scattered where we are. Right? And we also tend to not like to spend a lot of money as a general rule. So, you know, and there's reasons for that. A lot of us are poor because wealthy people have trouble finding paganism because they're happy with the status quo, and the status quo is, you know, atheist or Christian generally, right? If you're satisfied in your life, you don't look for countercultures, right? And paganism is still a counterculture. So we get a lot of people who don't fit in other ways. And one of those ways in which people don't fit is economics. So we have a lot of people who are highly educated and not making a lot of money. They all went to school, you know, and they're all, you know, I mean, they're not middle class, right? Not yet. So they can't afford to buy huge amounts of books or pay enormous speaking fees for us to come and speak to them, right? So we have to accept that, you know, our share of, like, there's, I tried, right, to make a living at it with my metaphysical store, and quite honestly, I make more money supplementing my income with writing and living on my husband's disability, which is pretty much what I do, right? Because it's just, you know, it was where I am. If I were in a more major metropolitan area, perhaps it would be different, but where I am, it just wasn't paying the bills, right? So it's going to be a side income. you can't depend on it as your focal income, right? You have to do other things.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people think it's a very different existence than it is, you know. I only have 2 books, so maybe I don't know as well, but I have talked to a lot of people over the years, and I do see that, you know, again, the ones that are doing okay, they're making the same money they'd be making if they were managing a McDonald's, you know, so you have to put it in context right there. And I think that, yeah, it's definitely a struggle and it's a hustle and all of those things. I do want to say this, though, you know, yes, these people don't have a lot of money, but at the same time, I'll watch these people tell me they don't have $16 for a book and then go buy a bottle of mead, which, hey, I enjoy a bottle of mead myself, but I think that there does have to be a moment of sort of, you know, giving back to people that we really are gaining things from, you know, and sort of giving back to the community in that way. And the, you know, extreme side of that is please don't download anything for free from any authors out there, since we're talking about publishing and things like that. You know, it happens all the time. I had somebody steal my article again this week. I had to ask them 3 times to take it down, please, you know, and they're like, oh, we're so sorry, we didn't know. It's like, you didn't know what? You didn't know you stole it from me? Like,
okay, here's some thoughts I have on that, right? Okay, if you would like to post my article on your blog, thank you. I appreciate that. Perhaps you could consider posting the first couple of paragraphs and then do what I do on my blog when I'm sharing other people's work, which is put a link that says read the full article at, and link it, because then people will go to my site and I will get paid for the page view, right? Because that is how writers on Patheos make money. We get paid by page view, and it's not a lot of money. I'm going to tell you right now. Don't have any illusions that we just get these huge paychecks because of ad revenue. We get a very, very small amount. I would not write for this amount of money in any other field that I'm writing in, right? I wouldn't.
oh, no.
Right?
No.
I do this because it's a labor of love. It is nowhere near a standard writer's rate, right? It's a nice little side thing that is mostly a pat on the head. And I'm fine with that because I like doing it, right? And part of the reason why I do it is so that I'm getting my name out there and people are seeing that I'm doing things, right? So fine, right? But, you know, can you not steal that 0.001% of a cent that I get, please? Just, please don't. Just put the link, right? I'm glad you're sharing it. I'm really grateful. You know, oh, and if you want to translate it, that's cool. Please, right? Tell me you are. I will be happy to put a link to your translation in the original article, right? I just had one of my articles translated into German like this past couple of weeks. I'm like, yeah, I was so honored. So cool. Okay. Now, as far as downloading books go and free downloads and all these sites, okay, there's two sides of this, okay? One side is the side of, okay, I live in a country where my currency is so devalued that I really cannot afford to pay the $7 or whatever it is American that your publisher wants for the book. You know what? I get you, man. Get a hold of me. I will give you a digital copy. I'm happy to do that. I'm fine, right? Then there's these groups who are like, oh, I just can't be bothered to pay for books, so we're all just going to upload all of our pagan books onto a Facebook group and share them all freely around. Okay, look, I get wanting to share knowledge too. I'm actually kind of flattered that my book will be stolen, right? Because somebody cared enough about it to do that, and they read it, and maybe they came back and read something else I wrote and awesome, right? But when you're doing stuff like that, right, like I said, it's not a lot of money, man. Can, like, if you're going to do that, can you give, like, $1 to my Patreon or something? Like, you know, just, like, don't share your book with 300 people, right? You want to share with your friends? Hey, man, I don't put digital rights management on any of my self-published work. I deliberately disable it so that you can keep it if I ever decide to delete it from Amazon, because, hey, you paid for the book, it's yours, as far as I'm concerned. I hate the way they approach it as licensing. That's bullshit, in my opinion, right? And I don't mind you making copies for your friends. right? Making copies for 1,000 other people on Facebook is going a little far. Please don't do that. There's my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, at least, like you said, give us something for it if you're going to do that. I mean, like I said, I usually do not do what you do about the first couple of paragraphs and then link back, but I will usually quote less than 2 or 3 sentences and then also link back to the original article, because I feel like that's what's fair. That's what I'd want somebody to do for me, you know, and I discovered it because this person had like completely stolen my Google ranking for this term that I'd ranked really high for, and now they were ranking really high for it with my article, which Google will devalue me just because it's duplicate content. So now it's like they screwed me, even though they took it down now, they've screwed me on so many different levels, you know, so it's really disappointing. It does make me think of, I had a friend of mine once, Papa Molly, he's a musician, and he was touring once with the Nevilles, and he said some guy came up to them after the show and had a bunch of bootleg CDs of their music that this guy had made, and he didn't sell them, so he dropped it off with the band afterwards when he got backstage, and they were kind of like, oh man, that sucks. And then he said they sold them all for beer money. So I was like, that's hilarious. So I'm like, well, what are you going to do? At least
Yeah,
gave it to the guys, and then they sold it and they had extra money for partying, you know. So, but even in that moment, the guy did actually go and deliver it to them and give them something, even though it was their own work, giving it back to them. But it's just this whole disregard and disrespect. And I think I've seen it a lot, especially among the witchcraft community, where people are like, I shouldn't have to pay for this information. It should be free, which we could do a whole nother show about that, you know. But I just think it's just really disrespectful to me, and it really is stealing, and I don't appreciate being stolen from. Like I did not sign up for that just because I put my information out there, you know.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Okay, I get that you shouldn't have to pay for this information. Why? Because it's religious? Okay,
Yeah.
sure, that's fair. What you're paying for is the editor's wages who had to edit my book, right? You're paying for the 3 years I spent writing it, which is my time, right? You're paying for the copy editor's wage who had to go through and, like, you know, and the person who did the layout, right? And the cost of printing the book, right? And you're paying for, you know, the 15, 20 years I spent studying the craft and then putting something together that was a teachable course that was useful to other people, right? Because, you know, science should be free too, right? But the labor of people who spent 7 to 10 years getting their PhD in the subject, right? It should count for something, and we've done that, right? And that, you know, like, okay, yeah, I chose to do that, right? But if I didn't do that, and I didn't spend 3 years writing the book, and I didn't do all this research, and these other people who are not me hadn't done all this work, right? You would never get to read this, right? It wouldn't be there for you. So, you know, just, I agree. I don't think I'm owed anything, but I don't think I'm owed disregard either, you know?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I definitely agree with that. You know, yeah. I don't know. I don't have anything else to add to that, but yes, I don't want to be disregarded. I don't want people to take my stuff. I don't. Although that said, you know, it's going to happen. You know, I'm going to tell everybody out there who's writing right now, if you're going to publish something and put it out there, someone's going to steal it. So just, you know, and I meant to say that when you mentioned reviews too, you know, people are going to hate your stuff. There's just haters out there. And, you know, if you can not read reviews, I recommend that. I have to know. I'm like a curiosity killed my cat kind of thing, and I have to see. And it's always a bad idea. It's always painful. It has nothing to do with reality, and there's nothing you can do about it. So, you know, stuff happens.
Jenna Marassi, who is she's an indie author who has a really popular YouTube channel about writing and indie writing and the writing process. She says that reviews are not for you, right? They're not for you, right? They're for people who might want to read your book. And the truth is, no matter what you do, not everybody's going to like it, right? I knew I was taking a risk when I was writing about drugs and sex in my book. I knew I was taking a risk when I was writing about the scourge. I chose to do it, right? Because I thought it was important and I felt that somebody needed to address it in a safe and responsible way, which I tried to do, right? And some people just, you know, are instantly going to disapprove because of that. And that's okay. The book's not for them. I didn't write it for them, right? I wrote it for the one who is curious and wants to know, all right, I want to take some, you know, I want to take something that'll help me to, you know, do some mystical work. How should I go about it? What's safe? What's not safe? You know, what are the legal consequences if I do that? I wrote it for them, right? So it's okay if people don't like your books. Stephen King is laughing all the way to the bank, and he has an average of something like 3.5 stars reviews on everything he writes because he has, you know, raving fans and inevitably a bunch of people who think he's a no talent hack, and he's making a living just fine. So yeah, right. That's the reality, right? And it's hard. It's hard to take that.
It is
right?
hard. It's definitely hard to take. I mean, like I said, I mean, I think that, you know, through planning and things like that, hopefully you can end up not with that person who has, you know, whatever, a 1-star review, you know, get enough people corralled together, you know. You can't pay for reviews, but you can say, okay, you know, I can give you a book in exchange for an honest review. You can do that. You know, so I think that you can at least try and I think just paganism in general comes with that kind of, there's going to be haters out there anyway. There's going to be people that are just disagree with everything that we're doing. So even if we wrote the best book in the entire world about whatever pagan subject we were writing on, there's going to be somebody who disagrees with us. And because they're allowed to use this public forum, you know, they can just hate on you. So it's just going to happen, you know.
Yep. The only advice I have is try not to take it personally.
Yeah.
Right. I know, not simple, but especially because it's writing, you know, writing is very personal. Sit down at your computer and open up a vein, right?
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, it's hard, but you know, if you're going to go anywhere with your writing, you just got to kind of go, okay, well, I'm sorry you didn't like it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think also related to this, one of the things I would say is sort of cultivate your friendships with other people and doing it. You know, if you can get endorsements, do that. Unfortunately for my last book, I had a whole long line of people, but after my third editor, all the endorsements just sort of fell by the wayside. Like they didn't even go out and there was only a week left. So I didn't get a chance to send it to anybody. And I sort of had to chase them down after it was published. And that was very difficult. You know, I know now that I do endorsements for other people. I know that it's good to know people. It's good to, you know, I will say I have turned down a few people because I honestly wouldn't endorse them. So I'm not going to put my name on anything that I don't like. You know, if you see me saying about something, this is very interesting, chances are I didn't like it very much. But that's just, you know, you can't say anything nice. But that's how I am. But I think that helps a lot to, you know, I mean, it also helps with social media and things like that. You know, like if you do a collective project and you can, you know, tag those people or at them, it just sort of spreads your name out even further. They say, what is it they say? People have to see your name 7 times and even more now with social media before they actually recognize it, you know. So it's hard to make sure you're out there, and that's a really, I mean, I think not shameless way of doing it. You know what I mean? If I'm at something with somebody literally, then of course I'm going to tag them because I'm sitting there with them. That's fine. But then it just sort of gives you that little bit more of social validity or clout when you do come out with your work.
Yeah, be a friend, you know, help other people and they'll remember that you helped them. Right. Okay. One thing I find, I'm kind of involved in 3 different writer communities, right? Because I do a bunch of different things, right? I'm involved in the pagan writing community, right? Where it's, you know, bloggers and people who are, you know, authors and whatnot out there on social media, right? And I'm involved in the indie writer community, right? And I'm involved in the sort of science fiction and fantasy writer community that orients around SFWA, right? The Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America, because I manage the YouTube channel, right? And okay, universally, right? Universally, they're all very supportive, right? There's always going to be jerks, right? But they're really the exception, has been my experience. Writer Twitter is amazing. There is a whole supportive community out there. They will encourage you when you're feeling low. You know, they want to read your books. They want you to read their books. That can get out of hand, right? I have this enormous to be read list that is huge, and that, you know, but if you try to help other people out, they will try to help you out, right? That's the best possible thing that you can do to promote yourself, is promote others, right? And like you, Lilith, I won't put my name on anything I don't like, right? So if I say, oh my God, you've got to read this book, I mean it. I read it and I thought it was great, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I wanted to ask you, since this is on topic, what about crowdfunding? What advice would you have for people about that relating to writing?
Okay. All right. Get on my soapbox here. Okay.
Right.
I've been making vague references to it on the show for, you know, a few weeks now, right? I kickstarted my book Once Upon a Time in the Weird West, and it was a successful Kickstarter. And I, you know, thank you. Yes, thank you, all my wonderful backers who supported me. You are all awesome and amazing, right? And okay, what advice do I have? My first advice is have a plan, right? Have a solid plan, know what you're getting into, budget accordingly. You're still going to not do it right. That's one thing I discovered. My formatting budget has turned out to be much more expensive than I was originally led to believe that it would be. I had never worked with a professional formatter before, so I took what people said was typical, and it did not turn out to work out that way for me. So I have gone over budget on that plan, but I'm still going to be within budget of the Kickstarter because I got more than I was asking for. They give you lots of information on Kickstarter and on Patreon that will advise you. My Kickstarter did much better than my Patreon. My Patreon is, you know, this modest little Patreon. I'm getting about $50 a month from about 9 people, right? So it's not huge, right? I will have a link if you want to be one of them, by the way. One of the things you do is support this program if you join my Patreon. Or Lilith, do you have a Patreon?
I do, and I have no backers at all.
Oh no, that's no good. Okay, no, we're gonna fix that. Okay, so back Lilith's Patreon too. One of the things you will support is this program, right? Even if it's $1, it's cool. It's helpful. It makes it a lot easier to get things done, right? Okay, so yeah, have a plan, right? Read their material, right? Whether you're doing Kickstarter or Patreon, they will give you advice about things that work. Do it, right? It's I found Kickstarter stuff to be a lot more, I guess, because the way the program is not the word that I want. Profile is not the word. Platform, that's the word I want. The way the platform works is much more specific than how it works with Patreon, because you have a lot of variety going on with what people are doing on Patreon and the model they use and stuff, right? So they can't give as specific advice. So it's not quite as helpful. It may vary depending on who you are and what you're doing, right? But the Kickstarter advice turned out to be spot on, right? They knew it. I did everything they said to do, and it worked, right? Yeah, have your budget, have your plan, ask for the exact minimum of what you need, right? Then, you know, if you have stretch goals, things you'll do if you get more money than you were expecting, let people know what they are, right? And people will get behind that. The other thing I discovered is bug your friends.
Okay.
I mean, okay, this sounds... I got into an argument on Facebook, right, where I was actually on the other side of the issue, right? Because in the indie writer community, a lot of stuff happens on Facebook, and people tag each other all the time in different messages. And hey, I'm up for this award. Would you vote for me? Hey, I've got this release coming up. Would you share it? You know, etc. Right? And it gets out of hand, right? When you got a lot of other indie writers on your group, like I do, right? Like I talk to a lot of them, right? So I'm like, okay, dude, please stop directly tagging me in, you know, this kind of stuff, right? And people got mad at me, right? They said, you know, well, they're just letting you know, kind of thing, right? And I'm like, well, I thought, you know, directly tagging people was a little bit too personal, right? And I thought, oh, you know what? Okay, maybe I'm wrong, right? Maybe this is a different etiquette that I'm just not up on, that has changed, right? So I said, okay, and I started directly tagging people, right, in that are my Facebook friends in mass posts, where I was like, okay, you can tag up to 99 people, and I was tagging 99 people and putting it out there and going, hey, you know, can you share this, right? And if you think it's a cool idea, can you support it, right? And you know, a couple people unfriended me, and fine. And those tended to be people that, you know, I only heard from when they wanted something, so I don't miss them. And,
Yeah.
you know, but a lot of my friends said, oh, you know, shit, I didn't know you were doing this. That's awesome. I'm in. And that's pretty much how the majority of the Kickstarter got funded, right? So there's my advice. Don't be afraid to ask your friends directly, right? And I thought about it too, and I was like, okay, you know, because I have different types of friends on my Facebook, right? I have people I know from metaphysical communities, and I have people I know in the pagan community, and I have people that I know from when I was in high school, and I have people that are indie writers, and I have people who are, you know, traditionally published writers, and this is kind of the big groups. And I was like, all right, so are the people that I knew in high school and the pagan people going to want to hear about this? And I thought, well, if not, then why are they on my friends list, right? Yeah. If they're my friends, they care about what I'm doing. I would care, right? If they're like, hey, I'm publishing, you know, I've been publishing pagan nonfiction, and now this is my first novel. Okay, tell me. Yeah, I want to share. I want to know. I want to get behind it. So I thought, well, shit, I'll just dare, and I'll do it. And so I turned out to be in the wrong on that particular rather vocal argument. So, yeah.
That's so funny. I would have thought the same thing too, because people tag me all the time and stuff I have nothing to do with. And I'm like, why am I in this? I don't understand. I mean, I don't unfriend them or anything, but sometimes I don't really let it go through to my page, because it really does seem sort of like self-promotion and not necessarily, again, like I said, something that I'm 100% behind all the time, you know. Plus, I know I get a glut of everything at every, you know, with everybody all the time. And I try not to add to that unless I, you know, think it's a really, really good, not that I would not share yours, but I'm just saying that sometimes.
Likewise, yeah. But I get it, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it's like, you know, somebody every class or every event or every whatever, you know, I think it gets a bit much. And it's funny, I actually fell out with another author about this very same kind of thing. You know, she was like, well, you share this thing and, you know, I'll do something for you, whatever you need. And I said, you don't ever do anything for me. You know, you don't share my stuff. There really has to be reciprocity as far as I'm concerned. You know what I mean? I'm all happy to support people in what they do, but I do kind of expect some support in return. You know, and I think that especially for what we're doing, pagan things, I mean, in my case, voodoo things, I think people are a little scared to share things because it says voodoo on it, and then they're going to get questioned or whatever, or hassled by people about the evils of witchcraft and voodoo, the name of the show, you know, so.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, and people don't realize that, you know, because of that, what we're doing is almost twice as hard to market in some cases, because people are really unfamiliar with it or scared or just, you know, still, I was talking all week about still being in the broom closet. You know, some people aren't really open and vocal or able to be open and vocal about what they believe, you know, so it's hard.
Yeah, I find the same. Right. And I find that it overlaps things, right? Like I find there are people who are fans of my science fiction and fantasy writing who don't, you know, like, I don't know, you know, I think they distance themselves from what I'm sharing because I'm doing stuff on witchcraft too. Right. And so they don't even support the things they would support. Right. And I find that very frustrating and difficult, you know, because it doesn't hold true the other way. You know, you can be a devout Christian and, you know, totally vocal about it, and I won't have anything to do with that, right? But if you share about your awesome new fantasy novel and I thought it was good, right? Or I liked the idea, I'll tell people about it. So, you know, just because you endorse part of what I'm doing doesn't mean you endorse everything that I'm doing. It's frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah, it
I feel your
definitely
pain.
is. Yeah, I agree,
Yeah.
100%.
But I agree with you on the reciprocity too. That was part of what I was saying in the argument, right? Because this person tagged me and I'm like, when was the last time you shared anything I had? You know?
Yeah. Yeah,
I don't
I
recall
agree.
a time. So no, you know, and people got mad and I'm like, well, you know, right? Yeah, but most people are very supportive, I find. Like really that's the exception. I find that most people are willing to share, right? And we're willing to help each other. And we have to be, right? We're a niche market. Odds are that a lot of the people who are buying our books are people who are writing books too, right? So we have to keep that in mind. And that's just as true in science fiction and fantasy as it is in paganism.
No, I agree. And like I said, you know, there were so many other authors that I knew that were so gracious to me when I came out with my most recent book, you know, even ones that I wouldn't have even thought to ask, oh, I should ask this person to share it, you know, because maybe they had a book on a similar topic, or maybe I'd only known them casually or something, but they were so kind and supportive of everything that I was doing. I really appreciate that, you know, and I try now, you know, somebody sent me a brand new book, you know, I got to review this week, and I realized it was another, you know, Black girl magic witch writing on astrology right out of here in New York, you know, and I reached out to her and I was like, look, I want to interview you. I want to promote you however I can, because this is just so important for me, you know, to be able to do this and to give somebody else a hand up. Not that because I'm lording over them. Lord knows I'm not lording over anybody with this paycheck, but you know, I've done it. I've been there. I know what it's like to go through it. And if I can do something to help somebody out, that's who I am, and what the right thing to do is.
Well, yeah, you know, people helped me, right? People are still helping me, right? I reached out recently. I'm not going to give names or anything, but there were a couple of people who I really admire that I've had opportunity to speak with at length over recent months. And I, you know, grew a spine and I asked them if they would read my Weird West book, and if they liked it, would they do a blurb for the hardcover edition? And they both said yes, and I was really grateful and surprised. So there's going to be a delay on the publication of the hardcover because I have to wait until they have read it. And here's hoping it worked out, right? So there's still people helping me, right? So the least I can do is help other people who aren't quite where I am at yet, right? And in return, I expect that they will pay it forward and help other people, right? And I'm cool because, you know, gods know we don't do this alone, right? Nobody gets here on their own. Everybody had help, right? Everybody.
No, it's very true. It's very true. I mean, yeah, I hope they'll pay it forward, and I hope they'll pay it back too. I'm not going to mince words about that. You know, if I have another new book, maybe they'll share it. You know, that's how this works. It's not, you know, it's not because this person's successful, I'm not successful. That's not, you know, and I think that was behind my argument that I got into with the person about, you know, reciprocity and sharing and things like that, that they really were so jealous and envious of me about the whole thing. Actually, you know, they ended up writing it. This was 8 years ago. They ended up writing a whole blog post about it last week about how
Wow,
I was
that's
like,
some grudge,
wow,
man.
look at that. You have this
Oh, I
giant
hope they
grudge.
can let it go now, you know?
I know,
Yeah.
you think so, you know, but it's still a contest for some people, you know, and then I keep thinking about my godmother who just passed. She used to say, you know, what is this? What are you going to get? What are you going to win? You know, you're going to get to dead first. And it really just sort of like resonates with me because
Yeah,
now she's
wise.
dead. You know, it's like,
Yeah,
you know, we're doing this to help people. We're certainly not all in it for the money, because if we were, we'd be doing something else, you know?
that's a fact.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, you know, I'm with you, right? I think that I think a lot of people do think this is some kind of competition, right? They see degrees and books published as, you know, status symbols or something. And seriously, it really isn't what it's about. So there are those who just can't see anybody else doing better than they are in some area, right? And they want to sabotage, right? And I think that's a really shitty thing. I think that's shitty for them, and I think that's shitty for everybody else. You know, if you don't like what I'm doing, okay, I'm cool with that. Go do your own thing, man. You know, I might even help you get it started, because probably there's a need and I just didn't want to fulfill that one, you know, right? There's lots of room in this pool. If we're all helping each other out, right? Okay, I say this a lot in the writing community, right? No reader will ever, you know, they'll never be pissed off because you recommended something else for them to read, right? Readers read. They read lots. You know, pagans read lots of books. We're disproportionately well educated in extreme amounts, right? We like reading. So it will not at all hurt me to go, you know, hey, you know, you're interested in love magic. We'll have just published this great book. You should check it out, right? It doesn't, they'll be grateful, right? So this is not a fight, right? It's not about who's on top, right? It's about, let's all do our best together, and then the world becomes better for everybody and we all have more fun, you know, and there's less stress.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. You know, what was I thinking? Made me think of something there when you were talking. Oh, that's another good point that I thought of. You know, if you have the opportunity to, yes, write blogs and things like that, but also if you have the opportunity to publish in something like the Witch's Almanac or Sage Woman or some of these other like pagan publications that a lot of people write for. You know, Sage Woman's a magazine and Witch's Almanac is a yearly. Is it yearly, quarterly? I don't even know anymore. But anyway, it comes out every once in a while. It's got a bunch of people in it.
There's this cool thing called We Moon that also does art and poetry.
Oh, yes.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
it's a date book that they publish once a year too. And there's Witches and Pagans magazine, of course, is still going strong. You can, you know, write articles for them. Yeah. There's not a lot of money in this, just letting you know.
No. But I think ultimately it does help you when you want to get the book sold or get it. Any advance really now is almost a miracle these days. They don't like giving advances lately. So I bet it will help you with negotiations about your advance and other things like that. And it'll help you, again, like I said, with your marketing. If you're in the anthology or that issue with all these other witches, then reach out to them, talk to them, try and say, hey, I read your piece. Did you read my piece? Things like that, you know, because again, we are introverts and it's hard and all of that. So
it's something that I didn't learn with the first couple of anthologies that I did that I now know much better. Right? I didn't reach out to the other authors in it as much as I should have. I kind of viewed it as this, okay, so it's a magazine and I said my piece and I got my payment and I'm doing my thing, right? Or whatever, right? Or I didn't get my payment and I'm going to buy my books and sell them, right? Because that was a deal too, right? But yeah, what I should have done was to reach out to each and every one of them and coordinate with them to do things like blog tour on each other's blogs, you know, talk about their work. Because if I'm promoting their work, I'm promoting my work, right? My work is in the same book. If they're buying their stuff, they'll buy my stuff too, right? And that comes back to the readers will always thank you for pointing them in the direction of things to read.
Yeah, definitely. I had sort of an epiphany moment for the Women of Babylon book that I was talking about before. I'd written a much longer piece and it got edited down just due to size because it's such a huge volume, you know, and I was thinking, I was like, wait a minute, maybe I could publish the rest of my story that didn't get, you know, published in this book on the blog. And then I thought, well, maybe all these other women have stories too that they wanted to also publish. So we ran a whole blog series with all of the authors from that, you know, manuscript about like, what are your other stories about sex and magic and connection to deity that way? And that was just phenomenal to me. I got art from them. I got poetry. I got all these things that would not have fit in the normal volume, but I really think it's very, you know, valuable magic. And like you said, more stuff for the blog. So more stuff out there. It was great.
Exactly. I've learned a lot about this from indie publishing, right? If you do anthologies with other indie writers, then basically you are your own marketing team. So you have to do a lot of that, right? And it works, you know, and it's fun, right? It's fun because you don't feel like it's you versus the world. You're in this as part of a team, and the team does things together. I loved it so much that I'm heading up my own anthology.
Nice.
So
Yay.
yeah, it's called Gunsmoke and Dragonfire, and I think there will still be a couple of days left to submit by the time this video airs. If you're interested in writing a fantasy western, right, I'm accepting submissions until the midnight October 1st Pacific time. So, you know, my maximum is 15,000 words. I don't have a minimum, but I'll tell you, you'll be more likely to get accepted if it's not flash fiction. The reason why is because I'm paying according to contributor shares, right? Whatever the profits are, we're going to split it according to however many authors there are, plus one editor share, which I get, and a share for our cover artist, right? And that is how we're going to split it. So if you're only taking up this much of the book, it better be an amazing story, right?
That's great. I love that. Fantastic. Yeah. All right. Do we have anything else to say? This was such a great topic. I'm so glad I thought of this.
Yeah, I'm so glad you thought of this too. And like, you know, when we sat down to go, what the hell are we talking about today? We do that a lot. So again, I will say, if there is something you want us to talk about, if you have something that you are interested in, please put it in the comments. Put it when we post the video on the blogs. You know, let us know, because we're always looking for ideas, and we would be happy to talk about whatever it is that you want to hear. Right? It's really, right? Just a quick word. I'll try not to take too long about the difference between traditional and independent publishing, right? Because a lot of people go in for independent publishing, especially in a niche market like the pagan community, and that might be a better decision, right? It really depends on what it is that you have to offer. There is a lot of stuff out there in the more polytheist niche markets that tends to be self-published, and it's good work, right? It might not be as well edited in terms of grammar, but that doesn't mean that the work they're doing is any less valuable. And the reason why is because hiring an editor is expensive, right? If you're working through a traditional publisher, they provide you one, and that's a big service. And that alone might make it worth it for you to go, okay, I will take the 7% retail royalty or the 10% wholesale royalty or whatever it is that they're offering you, right? Because, yeah, if you self-publish, you'll have to work with Amazon. Everybody has to work with Amazon, whether you want to or not, whether you hate them or not, you have to do it. And they, you know, if you're charging $1 for your book, you're getting 33 cents, I think it is, right? So the difficulty is getting it out there, right? If you are self-publishing, then you are jumping into a sea, right? And you are a water droplet. And there is still a certain stigma towards independent publishing, right? Which is why I would argue that crowd publishing is a different format, right? Because crowd publishing is like PBS, right? It's funded in part by readers like you, right? So it was vetted by your readers. They would not have paid for whatever it is that they contributed if they didn't think your idea was worth backing, right? You could, you know, if you're self-publishing, you've no idea what you're getting. But I will say that people who are prejudiced towards self-published work need to have an attitude adjustment, because there is amazing work out there. And why was it self-published? Well, there's lots of reasons. It doesn't all end with I couldn't get a publisher to publish it because it was no good. First of all, publishers don't publish necessarily what's good. Quality has a bearing, but mostly they publish what they think will sell, right? So they might be right and they might be wrong, but what they're looking for is a marketable product. They are not looking for the world's best quality literature, right? So
definitely,
right, there's that. So an independent might do it because they felt, okay, I really have this thing that I need to say, but I know that it's a really small market that's going to look into it, right? Or it might be that they wanted to do it in a, you know, series of short formats because they felt that that would be a better way to receive the information. And nobody's publishing novellas these days, right? It's really hard to do that. You can't get magazines to look at them most of the time, and you certainly can't get novel publishers to publish them. So what are you going to do, right? So yeah, there's lots of reasons, right? And the gap is narrowing, right? Bad editing can be difficult to deal with in a lot of independent work out there. But most people who've been around for a while know that that's not going to get anywhere, right? So what they do is they either pay a professional editor, right? Or they exchange editing with other independent writers. And so the quality of the work is significantly improved, right? So I think that, you know, and then the crowd publishing has elements of both, right? Because it's backed by people who thought it was a marketable product, at least to them, right? But you have a lot of the, you know, creative control and the difficulties of independent publishing, like getting your work out there,
right,
as well, right? So what path you choose depends on how much creative control you feel you need, right? What the nature of the work is that you're trying to put out there, right? And, you know, whether you already have a platform, right? Because if you don't have a platform, you are not going to sell anything independently, right? So, and everybody's choice is different, right? So I can't tell you what the best choice is for you, but be aware that these are very different. If anybody wants to talk to me about it, I'm available.
Cool. I mean, I think the only thing I would add is that there's a lot more avenues, I think, for pagan publishing than there were. You know, we started out this talking about, you know, Weiser and Llewellyn, and there's really been sort of a widening of the scope. There's a lot of traditional publishers that are taking this on. You know, City Lights, you know, with Ferlinghetti just published a Voodoo book about 1.5 years ago. I talk a lot about Christian Day. He's just started his own publishing company. He's looking for people. I think it's called Warlock Press. I apologize if it's not, but yes, they just started it a few weeks ago. So there's all of that going on. So I think there is a lot more avenues that, even if you thought maybe you wouldn't be able to go to a traditional publisher, I would just recommend, if you think you have a good product and you have a good following and you know what you're talking about, that you would at least try that avenue. Because as someone who's done it themselves, you know, like I said, back ghetto style, where I would sit there and, you know, staple them together and whatnot and sell them myself on the street, that it is easier in the immediate. That's all I'm going to say. There's a lot of things that go on when you have to deal with a publisher and an editor and all these other people up along the line. But, you know, to me, it is easier in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is, they take care of all that other side stuff that isn't the writing, right? So if you're a prolific writer, then independent publishing is probably your path, because that's how you make money doing that. You churn out the books, right? If you're not, I'm not, right? Then often traditional publishing is your better course, right? If you have a small platform and an unusual product, maybe crowd publishing is the way you want to go, right? And, you know, it's, but yeah, there's lots of options. There's small presses, there's big presses, right? There's collectives. Both of the anthologies I contributed to were collective efforts, right? And they did a great job, right? They had, like, I don't know, one is Asphodel Press and the other one is, I don't remember, and I'm going to get shot for it, but, but you know, but effectively they started as collective efforts. I mean, there was one person heading it up. They are actually both small presses now, right? But at the time they were more of a collective, and a lot of publishing efforts start that way. So if you've got something and you've got buddies who have similar things and you want to get your work out there, maybe you guys want to do a collective effort too. There's room for you. The market is actually growing in reading. The traditional market seems to be shrinking, but that's because a greater share is going, you know, independent ebooks and stuff, right? And together, actually, it's a much bigger pie, right? So there's room for you.
All right, keep writing. That's
Yes.
my advice. Keep writing, keep writing.
Thank you so much for doing this with me today. I'm sorry this turned out to be longer than I intended, but I really enjoyed the conversation.
It's fine. We had a lot to say.
We did.
Yeah. Yes, yes. Thank you. This is always a pleasure. Thank you.
Likewise. Yeah, we'll see you in 2 weeks, guys.
Yes, buy our books. Yay.
Buy our books.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.